Clara tomé is an environmental lawyer, EU Climate Pact ambassador, and advocate for environmental justice. Welcome to another episode of the Unbound podcast. Welcome to another episode of Unbound, the podcast about breaking what breaks us and remembering what binds us. My name is Kiki Lindenau, and before we begin, I invite you to soften your mind and open your heart. To listen, not to reply, but to connect. And to remember that staying human is a radical act. Clara, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit how you ended up in this line of work?
That's a good question, because if you meet me probably 10 years ago, I was a completely different person. My interests, my dreams were in another direction, 100%. It was a path. It was a compounding of things. It was a lot of learning and learning processes. But I think I connected all the dots when I was starting as a model. I started to work internationally, and I thought that was, my dream and my vocation, my purpose in life. And then suddenly, when you have that, you realize that it's not what you thought. Of course, I was also exposed to all the dark sides of the industry that so many times people just do not realize, because you just see the light and the beauty part of it. And then I started to ask myself questions. Is it this really what I want to do? What is the legacy that I want to build, right? And then I started to look around me, and I've been always rooted by and nurtured by my parents a lot in nature, and I've been always in contact with nature. But of course, when you're in these industries, that comes to a second place, and you're more focused on, unfortunately, on material things. I mean, it's the system. So then I started to value more what was around me and the nature around me, and understand everything that was giving me. And at the same time, was a moment where I could stop. And I think that was key, when you have time to stop. In the middle of the rush, you don't ask yourself these questions because you're just in automatic pilot. And when I stopped, I was able to, have time to think what I really want to do and what is really important for me. And I connected again with those roots that my parents nurtured me with. And then it was the same year that the Amazonas, all these incredible fires that were happening. And I was very curious to understand the cause. And then when I interconnect that, actually the main cause of the deforestation of this incredible place was related to what was in my plate, I was kind of like shocked.
Can you explain a little bit how that is interconnected?
Yeah, for sure. So basically 80% of the Amazon studies show that is connected to basically the meat industry, because to plant soy that then is fed to the millions of animals that we kill every day, they need to cut all these trees. And this is not just affecting to all the biodiversity and the whole ecosystem, but also to the indigenous communities that live there. So for me, it was kind of like, is it really worth it? The satisfaction, the momentaneous satisfaction of eating a burger, eating a steak, knowing all the damage that is behind that steak, and having all the facilities that we have today and all the alternatives that we have today to make that substitution. Understanding that not everybody is able to do so, but I had the privilege and the option to do so. So that's when I decided to quit meat, and I'm a vegan since then. So that was kind of like my first, I would say, like hard decision that started my path on the activism, and to understand, okay, actually maybe there's more things that I'm doing on my daily basis that I don't know that are causing this type of damage. And then it's just you enter in a kind of like a corridor, and you never look back, because it's impossible once you know the truth. It's like the Matrix, you cannot just go back. So that's how everything started, I would say, in that specific moment.
And so then you started working a lot with indigenous people in the Amazon, right? After kind of finding out about the harm that our actions here are causing to them. And I wonder how that changed your understanding of the whole ecological crisis.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I started to work recently with indigenous communities, actually, but back in those days, I had already the interest to understand how this is really affecting them, because I just knew from reading papers and so on. And I remember having this travel, for example, to Costa Rica, and I met indigenous tribe there, and I had a curiosity to ask, like, is this really happening here also in Costa Rica? Because I know about this, and they told me, oh, yes, like, this is happening here too. You know, we have this issue where American companies just come and get our land without permission, and they just own it and do whatever they want, and they just push us from our ancestral land. And I was shocked to hear that from a specific person that has gone through that. And of course, I started to interconnect. I think like that was more in the last years, to interconnect all these dots on how environmental injustices and, you know, extractive systems are like the root cause somehow of the climate crisis. Because at the end, we have this tendency to think about the climate crisis as a CO2 problem, or even as an abstract problem, you know, from natural disasters, like, oh, this is happening and nobody knows why, right? And no, it has a name. It has name and surnames behind it. It has real causes that you can point with your finger, and those are mainly the fossil fuel companies, you know, that were since years trying to hide or trying like to do propaganda or deny the climate crisis when they knew since the beginning that this was going to happen, and they just spent billions of money to try to hide this. So at the same time, to be able to produce on this way, the fossil fuel companies, they were needing to take these lands. They were needing to kill a lot of like indigenous communities that were on these lands that they need to extract oil from. Everything is just so interconnected. And when you just start seeing the dots and start to understand who are the responsibles and who are always the victims, is when you understand the whole picture and you see the crisis, this climate crisis, as what it is, which is a crisis of justice, I always say, and not just of emissions, statistics, and things that most of the people do not understand, you know.
So to me, it sounds like, if I can kind of summarize a little bit, capitalism in action. You know, we need to extract. That's what the system is built on. We take it to another country that doesn't belong to us. So we colonize them, kill the people that live there, and then we hide what we're actually doing and shift the blame to the individual and say, hey, you need to fly less and close your windows when you're heating up your place. Does that summarize kind of the cause and problem a little bit?
Definitely. I would say like the root cause in the modern world, yes, is fossil fuel companies. But if you go back in history, it's colonialism. And since all this capitalist system, globalization, industrialization started, like those are the values filling the system. And as you said, these companies, you know, trying like to shift the blame on individuals, you know, to avoid accountability. And that's why it's very interesting to know that actually the concept of individual carbon footprint was actually pushed and created by British Petroleum, which is a fossil fuel company from the UK.
How convenient.
Yeah, how convenient, right? So you spend all your time, you know, calculating how much CO2 you emit and trying to do less or whatever while keep doing the same and maintaining the same profitable systems.
Do you think that we can solve the climate crisis in the current system?
Not in the current system.
So what needs to change in our understanding for us to be able to actually come up with solutions that are going to solve it?
Well, that's a really hard question. I would say, first of all, we need to understand and recognize those root causes that I was telling you about, you know, how colonialism, how capitalism has shaped this. Because still, until today, there's so many people that don't want to look back because it's not convenient for them. But we need to look back. And I know it's boring. I hate history.
It's painful, yeah.
And it's painful too, you know. History, when I was in class, that was the least of my favorite subjects for sure. And now I became like a freak on knowing what really happened. And now I love it because it's like, oh my God, you know. And also it's the way to understand why we are in the moment that we are. Why are the things happening? Because history repeats itself. So I think first we need to acknowledge that and try to not repeat and perpetuate like the same things that we did. So I think that's the first step, to start deconstructing our minds, our ways of relating with nature, with other people in the global south. And then, of course, we need to get very creative, because at the end, capitalism, as any other oppressive system, makes you erase your capacity of imagining something better without it. That's why a lot of people is like, so if it's not capitalism, what? Socialism, communism? Have you seen like something that has worked before? Excuse me, is capitalism actually working? Maybe for you, maybe for some elites in the top. but it's not working for the majority of people. So we really need to get creative there and think of different systems that are already like happening. There's people organizing with how degrowth, for example, could look like, how eco-socialism could look like. Because, of course, Evo Morales tried eco-socialism back in those days in Bolivia, and it was an incredible idea. But then to build an eco-socialism inside that capitalism was kind of like complicated. But I don't think because one thing has failed in a specific context of time, in a specific place, we can take it as an example to say this is not working
ever again anywhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to keep creating. We need to keep organizing ourselves to think, okay, what are the possibilities? How can we build those? But of course, I think like the only way it needs to happen like a revolution. We really need to, boycott collectively the whole thing. And I hope it happens during my lifetime. I thought it wouldn't, to be honest. I think we're planting the seeds of a plant, of a mushroom that somehow in the future would flourish. So we are already on the path, how people is, understanding how the system works finally and understanding who is benefiting from the system. We might be able to see this sooner than later.
I feel like a shift is happening. Yeah, I saw something the other day where the Epstein files were kind of the light switch turned on, and it's like the system was always there and now we're able to see it. So in a way, it's a blessing in disguise because now we can actually act on it.
Exactly.
So what is a solution that you have found to be effective or more effective, to be working as something that we can do? So the individual carbon footprint is not it. So, I mean, obviously we have to, not just do whatever we want to, but continue managing ourselves. But what is something that we can do as a collective that could work?
Well, I think I always say the most important thing is that you find your niche, you find your group. It can be an NGO, it can be a local group that you organize yourself and you create with like-minded individuals, and you just, get reunited and put some ideas on the table and use your talents and your skills to the service of the earth or to build a new system. I think that's the most important thing, because at the end, part of the strategy that I see that this system have is, make ourselves isolated and, spend our time instead of nurturing relationships, instead of getting creative and getting together how we can, make this planet better. We are isolated in cells with our individual goals and individual necessities of, what is important to me, and I don't give a shit about what is happening to my neighbor and things like that. That sense of community has been lost in most of the global north. I would say worldwide, but in the global north has definitely always happened like this. But because globalization, I think we need to come back to community, basically. I mean, I spend a lot of time because my work is around my NGO and different groups and different NGOs that I'm part of. So I have those communities. But then, for example, because I'm trying to build that better world for the work and the mission that we're doing, I kind of forget to call my mom, for example. I kind of forget to call my friends. Hey, what's up? How are you? So even if you are trying to do the best work and with a really good mission, you still are on the productive system of...
It's crazy, right? It's crazy, yeah. I think it's going to take some time and we have to be gentle with ourselves. And it's not going to take a day to unlearn what has taken 25 to 30 years to learn. So.
Exactly. I was reading actually the other day something very funny. Actually, cuddling is the most anti-systemic thing you can do.
Oh.
Yeah. It was saying, if you are just cuddling with your girl, with your boy, whoever, you're just there, stopping. You're not consuming nothing. You're present and you're doing something that is for free. And yeah, it's a way to stop somehow. You're spending time on something that you is not allowing you to consume. I could put a lot of examples, like just having a walk in nature, meditating. There's so many ways to stop. I understand not everybody has the privilege to stop. We need also to understand that. But if you have the privilege, I think stopping, not consuming, everything that is kind of against what fits the capitalist values of growth, of consumerism, everything is valid. Everything is welcome. And find those, try to find those moments on a daily basis, I think that's key.
You touched on something earlier that I feel like relates to this as well, is to get back out into nature. And I feel like we've talked about this before, that us as human beings, we've forgotten that we don't own nature, but that we are nature. Like we're literally a part of nature. So how do we reconcile that?
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic too. I said before, this is a crisis of justice, but it's also a crisis of separation, actually, right? It comes to back to the colonial period, when all the colonizer came to these lands and established those values of dominion over nature and broke those relationships that were established for centuries by the indigenous communities, where the relationship that they have with nature is relationship. So I think that's the main root cause of it, the erasure of all those values and establishing domination that is also related to the religious mindset of God gave us all of this.
Yes.
Everything is here given by God to us, so we need to use it. And as humans, because we are the ultimate species, we must dominate nature, right? To get back to it, as I was saying, you need to do a lot of process of decolonizing, deconstruction, knowing history, and then reconnecting with nature in a way that makes sense for you. I don't think there's one solution that fits all of us. For me, the best way is spending time with it, of course, with her. Like I've been in incredible places surrounded by animals of every type, like in Corcovado, in Costa Rica, in Brazil. And when you are just in silence in front of such a magnitude, you just feel so small and that this is bigger than yourself. I know there's something out there. You can call it God, you can call it force, whatever. And for me, it's related to nature, kind of like we don't comprehend the magnitude of the force and the intelligence that Mother Nature has to be able to build all the relationships on an ecosystem that functions so perfect, to everything have a sense and to balance so well. And when you just listen and be intentionally present in nature and you pay attention is when you understand, oh my gosh, like we are part of this actually, right?
I was just thinking that too. It's, nature has cycles. We as women follow the same cycles. And even men who have a 24-hour cycle, that's the day and night cycle. So that's like the literal translation of the whole big thing into our bodies.
True.
That was a big thing for me to kind of reconnect with nature.
True. And I think coming back to the acknowledging indigenous knowledge as well is pretty important,
Why is that so on the sidelines? It seems to me that was such a way that it worked for centuries. And then the West just kind of came in with their capitalist, patriarchal, colonial ways of thinking, and it brought the entire order out of balance. Why don't we look at indigenous communities but keep them on the sidelines? Why is it so essential to keep this knowledge in our systems rather than just making it a hippie alternative that we maybe one day look at?
Exactly. No, that's key. That's key, and that's what we are advocating for. It's again, there's a lot of like, at least in Europe, this mindset and Occidental mindset, I would say, where we just can trust in science. But what is science? Like, modern science. Okay, why you don't consider indigenous knowledge that has been, as you said, working, functioning for centuries?
And it's way older too. Like it's worked for way longer.
It's just like different methods, but it's based on also like seeing and monitoring without machines, without things. But it's also, it's kind of like the same. They have their knowledge and it needs to be recognized as a type of science too. But recognizing that from the West, that means losing a little bit of power, I feel. Like they are a bit fearful. I think like the system is a bit fearful because, first of all, acknowledging those systems is not profitable many times. It's not profitable for the same people that want to profit. On the other hand, it takes a lot of recognizing history again and recovering those things that we try to erase when the West came to indigenous lands. This is a good topic. I'm trying to think because this is actually very deep.
I think the loss of power is a very good point. I think it's if you grow up thinking you need to control everything. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have that very, very deeply engraved from how I grew up that I feel like I need to be in control of everything all of the time. And so trusting something that doesn't revolve around control, but more sort of a way of letting it flow and trusting that's really difficult for us. So if for us on an individual level, it's difficult to give up control, imagine a whole society being like, okay, sure, we're going to trust you.
And also, actually, the fact that if we look at indigenous knowledge and we start listening and applying those things, we need to stop seeing nature as a commodity, as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
We need to completely change the way we change the system, basically.
Yeah.
We change the whole system because this system, this capital system, is based on that dominion that we talk about, on seeing nature as another thing that is not us, and as an object that we can just extract and exploit. So coming back to that knowledge is understanding that is a relative, like a river, a rock, a tree is a relative. It's not a resource. That completely changed the things. That doesn't mean that indigenous people don't use nature somehow because they use the land to plant their things. They still use it, but they use it in a way that it respect the cycles, the seasons and all of that. So that's very against the system because the system wants, just infinite growth. So I think that's why people don't want to look there. Because if you look there, automatically you challenge the very first pillars that sustain capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you do this a little bit in your work, right? You speak about rights of nature, earth jurisprudence. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, rights of nature actually has its roots on these indigenous cosmovisions of seeing nature as a living entity, as a relative, not as a person, because many people are confused, not as a person, but as a thing that is alive, not as a resource, not as a commodity to be traded and to put a price on it, right? And from the rights of nature, we recognize that nature also has their own rights, which are different from human rights. The right, for example, to regenerate, the right to exist, of course, the right to thrive, And there are so many ecosystems right now that have been recognized with inherent rights, with that inherent value on our legal systems. For example, in Ecuador, the first one that recognizes nature in their constitution. We have cases in New Zealand, in Colombia, in Peru, like all over the world, even in Spain. So it's this earth jurisprudence and this new mindset is emerging. The important thing is how then we apply it. And that's when we are getting a little bit stuck because even we have those laws are not really being respected. And that's why also we are trying to understand, okay, in a productive way, when do you say that this is not respecting the rights of nature, in this case, the rights of this river? And that's when you need to talk more about planetary boundaries or introduce indigenous knowledge as well to understand, okay, this is the limit. This is all the ecosystem can take, and here is where we need to stop. So yeah, there's so many cases around the globe, and this is a really also a very systemic movement, that complements and adds also to the respect of indigenous people, indigenous territories, and so on. It's now more like in trend, and we should not romanticize it because some people misunderstand what is rights of nature and connect it with conservation, and with this type of understanding of, then if we protect nature and we respect the rights of nature, then we cannot allow people to touch nature and it's untouchable. No, that is not true. And this is a very Western thought too, like to conserve a place, we need to just leave it wild, pristine, make these huge reserves. And so many people don't know that actually most of the world's most famous reserves and parks that everybody wants to go, including me, are built by displacing these indigenous communities that were there before. This is a thing a lot in the reserves in Africa, And this is fucked up because actually, if you look at how the things work, the most biodiverse places in the world are places that are managed by indigenous people, are places where indigenous people have recognized their territorial rights and they coexist in harmony with nature. Not those places that are empty, pristine, untouched, and there's no humans there because that's what we have been told. Humans are destroying nature. Then to protect nature, we need to erase humanity, right? We are the virus of this world. We are not. It's the system. Because this world has been surviving and thriving under the hands of many indigenous communities because they know how to coexist in harmony with nature. So if you really want to do conservation, if you really want to respect the rights of nature, you need also to respect the rights of the people who knows how to coexist with nature, who knows how to build that relationship that is based on reciprocity, guardianship with ecosystems.
I love that you bring back the people are part of nature. So the solution can't just take people out of nature and then call that a solution. And I want to give you a chance to speak a little bit about the organization that you just funded. At the Unbound Pod, we always highlight a grassroots initiative. And so for this episode, that's going to be Rights and Roots. So tell us a little bit about why you started this organization and what you plan on doing with it and why people should donate.
Great. Thank you so much. At Rights at Roots, what we do is basically we support indigenous communities and frontline defenders because we understand that to protect nature, you need to protect first the people who is in the front lines and who protects nature literally with their bodies, with their life, against all these extractive projects, against all these injustices that are happening. They are the real guardians of nature, and that's what we should invest on these people. We do it through different lines. One is more the legal side of things because my background is on law. So trying to support on processes that recognize their territories, the demarcation of their territories. You know, if we have the opportunity like to sue some companies and offer some type of support on the legal side of things because we understand how dangerous it is, especially in South America, to start kind of like these processes against these giants that have so much power and money. So we want to offer some kind of backup as well.
Just quickly, why is it dangerous exactly?
Good question. Basically, you know, there's so many economic interests for companies on certain territories that if you try to basically sue them or try them not to be on that land, they will make everything possible and pay someone for you to be eliminated. And this is a daily thing. Colombia, Brazil, are one of the most dangerous places to be an environmental activist. And it's not the same way that we are environmental activists in Europe. We just can like go to the street, speak, and then go home and everything is fine. There you're like literally
risking your life.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's so many indigenous people and frontline defenders, even lawyers that have been killed.
Wow.
Because they are fighting against one of these big industries. And the thing is that you cannot demonstrate that that big industry was part of that crime because they might be paying someone, like a professional criminal, to kill somebody. So it's very hard. And also, like, you know, because of the corruption of the governments and because how governments themselves see indigenous people so many times, because there's a lot of racism there too. They don't even make justice, let's say. So that's why it's very important. And like, for example, there was this case in Ecuador, if I'm not wrong, in the Amazon in Ecuador so many years ago. And Chevron, one of the main oil companies, spilled like a lot of oil on this river. Oh,
yes, I remember this.
Like a big case. And it affected so many communities. I don't know in which year it was, but so many years ago. Until today, they didn't pay, although they lost the court. They
really?
Lost. Yeah, of course they lost. There was this Ecuadorian lawyer and an American lawyer. They did an amazing job. And yeah, they won the case. Imagine how are the things that even they won, Chevron found something about this Steven, this American lawyer. Some type of like, I don't know exactly what they found, but some type of process that they managed to put him in prison as a way of revenge.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he was 2 years in prison as a way of revenge from this company, you know, because that's the power they have. We need to understand it's not just monetary power. It's also like political power. It's very complex. And that's why like on that imbalances of resources, we need to support these people because literally they are protecting nature for all of us. I have this friend, Mauri, from Brazil, from the Borari community. He's a real warrior. Like right now they have this fight against the government because of a decree that is allowing the exploitation, privatization, and dredging of one of the most important Amazonian rivers. And he was the other day, you know, on the occupation that they have been on for 20 days. And this politician, whoever, he was passing there with his car and trying like to provocate, like there's a whole video about it. I just went in front of the car, you know, because he was scaring the kids and the woman. He went in front of the car. Wow. And you can see in the video how the guy starts like accelerating. And he almost like flew out, basically. He's okay, thanks God. But he always tell me like, I'm not scared, Clara. First of all, I'm protecting what gives me life. But people need to understand that I'm not protecting this river or this forest because of me or my community. We are doing this and we are protecting this for everybody. Because that's also the thing. We think that this is not our problem, you know, and we are not interconnected somehow in the Amazon, with the ocean, because it's very far away. No, like we live on the same planet. And even if the distance are far, you're breathing air that was coming from another forest, coming from another part. So everything is so interconnected that we need to understand that actually they are fighting those things for us. Because at the end, if they're not fighting those companies are coming to that territory. They are extracting, they are like polluting, they are contributing mainly as the main cause to this climate crisis that then is affecting us. Then in Spain, we have Adana. Then in Italy, we have like these floods. So it's everything interconnected, and we really need to recognize the leadership and the role of guardians that they have and support that, because we're chill here in our sofas,
Until now.
Exactly. We can do some activism here and there, but we're not risking our lives.
Right.
We can do some digital activism, whatever, in the commodity of our sofas. These people is not doing that. These people is really like in the front lines. And that's what we really need to acknowledge and support. So that's what we are trying to do. And on the other side of things, we are also trying to support community-led projects that respects indigenous rights, human rights, and the rights of nature. So that's when we are trying to apply those. And we're, for example, now collecting money to be able to build an ecotourism project for this friend, for the Borari community, that gives them a revenue at the same time that respects the rights of nature, because it's going to be made in such a way that respects the ecosystem to thrive, to be to regenerate, and so on. And at the same time, it's going to serve as a political infrastructure to be able to monitor what injustices are happening. Because so many times, my friend tell me, I cannot go certain places by walk because I risk my life. And that's why we need sometimes a boat and a drone to be able to capture these things so we can demand them, right? So that's why equipment and these type of things are very important. And see, just with a boat, and that is pretty cheap to be honest, but just with a boat and a drone, you can like literally change so many lives and try to make some justice on this territory.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And to you out there, if you're listening and this touches you, because it certainly touched me, if you can, please consider donating so that Clara and her organization can continue doing this amazing work. Thank you so much. Other than donating to your organization, what is one action that we can take to make a systemic difference today?
First of all, I would say that there's so many solutions out there that are valid, but are part of the same system. So if you have the chance, of course, to buy better choices that are more sustainable, but that doesn't mean that, everybody is able to do so. That is great, but it would not be my first advice. First things first, and first things will be like, do not consume if you don't need something. If you can like reuse it, ask from somebody like to borrow to you, things like that. So you don't, feed the systems at the core. But I would go a step beyond on considering the way we consume, because that's very important, boycotting some brands too, and so on. But I would say also, as I said before, try to organize, try to create your own groups, try to join other groups. It's a lot of process of learn new things, put yourself on that uncomfortable position to grow your mind. Because I think that's the key, I think we fear uncomfort because it's painful, but it's the only way to grow. And for me, it was very uncomfortable to understand how my habits or how my ways of thinking are contributing to this crisis, and challenging those, and understanding also that I'm not perfect, embracing that imperfectionism, because we cannot be 100% sustainable. We need to have moral ambition. That's very important. No moral perfectionism, right?
I like that.
Because otherwise, we are putting some pressure onto the people when we don't understand, no, everybody is able to do the same, don't have the same economic opportunities or even the same education to know everything that I know, for example, everything you know, right? Why we don't speak more about the things that we do wrong, our, imperfections, where we are fucking it up, Yes, we just bought a coffee in a plastic, at least it's not a Starbucks, but we just bought
Never.
that. And I have my own. I mean, I have also my own reusable cup, my own reusable bottle. But I do sometimes when you are here and there, or you are in rush. Sometimes you buy a plastic bottle. Sometimes you buy a plastic cup. That's okay. That's okay. It's the system. It's not your fault. If you don't have another chance, it is all right. And you don't need to blame yourself because of that.
And then feel like, oh, okay, I already messed this up. I might as well not try anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was so fearful. I was so scared, before. I remember like some years ago, like, oh, I'm going to do a video. Just hide the plastic bottle, right? Like they're going to like point at me. Now I don't care. Because it's not about that. Like I'm trying my best and I need to be an example for others. I understand because of my position. But I think it's on that imperfectionism that we can then, get everybody into the movement. Not just the people who is doing like the perfect, sustainable, zero waste type of thing. Because that's super toxic, by the way. All the people that is like, but you are not using zero waste thing. But you are not composting. But you are like, well, not everybody has the privilege to do so, first of all. And you cannot be blaming others for not doing so. That's not where we should focus. We should focus, what can we do our best as consumers, as citizens? How can we use our time, to build a better system? How can we help each other instead of just fighting each other on who is doing the best, who is doing wrong? Like that's just, fits the system because we are not looking up. Is where we need to look. Who is up? Who is benefiting from all these discussion? So that's why I would say, rather than challenging or changing our consumption habits, which are important too and can coexist with more systemic solutions, we need to organize. We need to cultivate empathy and get creative to build those systems that we were talking about before. And I would say also indigenous authors, listen, indigenous communities, support NGOs that support these people. No, but it's real, like all the answers are already there. There are so many solutions for the climate crisis that people is going to talk to you about, like carbon credits, biodiversity credits. That is just benefiting the same people up there, It's just instruments that benefit the same people. Even the transition, which we need to transition away from fossil fuels, so many times it repeats the same, extractive colonial patterns. Try to not idolize all these people that apparently when they appear into our eyes, like Elon Musk, oh, this guy is going to solve the climate crisis because he created the Tesla and the EVs, or Bill Gates. Please, people, please, critical thinking is the same elites, is the same people up there. It's not them where we need to look and idolize and be fan of. To be very fair and to be very clear, it's not normally white people either, because there's a lot of like white narcissism and white supremacy that is already a fact. So try to look at those people that are not in front of you. Investigate, research, like which are authors that are indigenous, African, Black, Brown, Latino, you can support and you can learn from and give visibility to as well. So I would say that just
perfect.
Shift your mindset there.
Amazing. And subscribe to the Unbound podcast because that's exactly what we're doing here.
Exactly.
I have one last question for you before we close out for today. What does it mean to be human?
Oh, wow. Well, I think after this conversation, I would say for me to be human is to understand that we are not just the dominant species. We are not separate from nature. We are just part of it. So we're the small, tiny thing in the middle of this grandiose planet, universe, whatever. And we need to, from there, understand that we are just coexisting with another living beings, with something bigger than us as well, with this Mother Earth intelligent, and that we need really to, live in harmony with all of that because we depend on that. Mm-hmm. And understanding our role as not from the guilt, that, we were destroying this planet, whatever, but more from the responsibility. Mm-hmm. I think it's a difference between guilt and responsibility, and to be human in all these interconnected ecosystem, we need to understand that symbiosis that we have with what's around us, and it comes with a responsibility on it. What can we do better? How we should steward and be also guardians of what gives us life, the water, the air, all of that.
Yeah, you're right. Amazing. Thank you so much for having come today. Very, very interesting conversation. I loved it. I hope you out there did too. And I'm going to send us off with a wish for you and for all of our listeners from our last guest. No matter how impossible something seems, don't forget to have joy in the pursuit of making it possible, as it is that joy that fuels our fight sustainably.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here today.